Welcome, dear friends, and let me regale you with a sordid tale of sin and redemption, where the ghosts of the past haunt a man until an incredible survivor shows him the path to atonement. Enjoy the story. John Miller jolted awake, his sheets drenched in a cold sweat. The same haunting nightmare had revisited him again, a young girl's face twisted in terror, screaming for help as flames engulfed the crumpled car. John squeezed his eyes shut, trying to shake the gut-wrenching images from his mind. "It was so long ago," he muttered to himself. "Get a grip, Miller." But the girl's pleading cries echoed endlessly, a cruel reminder of the conscience he had abandoned that fateful night years ago. 15 years earlier. The pulsating music shook the nightclub's walls as a young, reckless John Miller knocked back another shot of whiskey. At 22 years old, he was the life of every party, always the center of attention, surrounded by a rotating cast of admiring girls. Tonight was no exception, as John caught the eye of two stunning blondes across the crowded dance floor. Donning his signature devilish grin, he swaggered over, whiskey in hand. "Hello, ladies," John purred. "Care to get out of here?" The girls giggled, immediately under his spell. An hour later, the trio sped away from the club in John's cherry-red Camaro. "Where are we going?" one of the blondes slurred as John whipped around corners at dangerous speeds. "Just a little detour," John winked, throwing back the last swig of whiskey. Up ahead, a rusty old sedan puttered along at a snail's pace. "Oh, come on, Granny! Let's go!" John shouted, flooring the gas pedal to recklessly overtake the slow-moving vehicle. But as he swerved into the other lane, the little sedan suddenly jinked to the left. There was a sickening crunch of metal as the cars collided, sending the sedan spinning off the road where it slammed into a tree trunk. John's Camaro screeched to a halt as the other car burst into flames. He saw the terrified face of a young girl passenger, maybe 10 years old, screaming and pounding uselessly on the window. "Oh my God!" one of the blondes shrieked. John felt his chest constrict with panic. He threw the car into reverse and sped away, leaving the burning wreckage and the doomed girl behind. "Order up. Table 7 needs the pulled pork special." John Miller snapped out of his trance and hurried to grab the plates from the kitchen window. At 37, he had left his reckless youth far behind to become the successful owner of Miller's Roadhouse, a popular BBQ joint on the outskirts of Chicago. As he wound through the crowded restaurant, a bright smile caught John's eye from across the dining room. It belonged to a young woman with long chestnut hair. She must be the new waitress he had hired. Despite the awful scars marring her pretty face, there was an unmistakable radiance about her. John set down the plates at table 7, his gaze lingering perhaps a moment too long on the new waitress as she warmly greeted customers. So entranced was he that he barely registered the name tag, Emily, pinned to her apron. As the lunch rush settled, John decided to properly introduce himself. He found Emily refilling glass ketchup bottles in the kitchen. "Hi there. You must be Emily," John smiled, putting on his most charming demeanor. "I'm John Miller, the owner." Emily looked up with a polite smile. "It's nice to meet you, Mr. Miller." "Please, call me John." He subconsciously straightened his shirt. "I just wanted to welcome you aboard and let you know if you need anything at all. I'm here to help." To his surprise, Emily's smile stiffened ever so slightly at his words. "Thank you, but I'll be just fine on my own." Something about her curt response threw John off balance. She turned away, leaving him flustered. Over the next few weeks, John couldn't keep his eyes off the new waitress. There was just something about Emily that drew him in like a moth to a flame. Maybe it was her confident presence, or the mysterious undertone behind her perpetual smile. Or maybe it was the challenge she presented. While all the other waitresses giggled at his flirtatious remarks, Emily remained unswayed, completely professional. The more she brushed him off, the more intrigued John became. One evening after closing, John caught Emily taking tips from the hostess station, her back turned to him. Sensing an opportunity, he cleared his throat loudly. Emily whirled around, busted. I can explain." "I'm calling the police," John said sternly, taking out his cell phone. "Unless you want to give me a reason not to." Emily's eyes went wide with panic before hardening with resolve. Is that what you want? For me to degrade myself? Well, if it will teach you a lesson. John let the implication hang in the air. Emily clenched her jaw but slowly began unbuttoning her shirt. She shrugged it off, revealing the top of her torso crisscrossed with thick, twisted scars. A hush fell over the empty dining room as John stared, open-mouthed. Emily then turned around fully, showing her entire back was consumed by the mottled flesh. Is this what you wanted to see? She asked coldly, unable to meet John's stunned gaze. John stammered, suddenly ashamed at the depths he had stooped to make this poor woman expose her darkest secret. As Emily turned to retrieve her shirt, he caught a glimpse of tears streaming down her cheeks. John spent the next 2 weeks in a fog, utterly distraught over his appalling treatment of Emily. Her scars had seared themselves into his memory, conjuring shadows of the long-suppressed nightmares he had tried so hard to forget. By the flickering light of her apartment, Emily sat tending to her bedridden mother. The older woman's face was also terribly scarred, her body twisted from the same unspoken trauma. "Mom, I'm going to get you your medicine," Emily said softly, moving to stand. A shaking hand feebly grasped Emily's wrist. Her mother seemed to study the scars crisscrossing her daughter's face. "I'm so sorry, my sweet girl," the woman whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "You never should have paid for my mistakes." Their quiet moment was shattered by a harsh knocking at the door. Emily furrowed her brow and went to answer it, finding a sheepish-looking John Miller on the other side. "What are you doing here?" Emily asked warily. John swallowed hard. "I came here to beg your forgiveness and to make things right somehow." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a bulging envelope. "Please, take this. It's a down payment on the medical care your mother needs. Whatever she needs, it's covered." Emily stared at the envelope dumbfounded as John pressed it into her hands. How did you know?" she whispered. John's eyes glistened with shame. "I have connections. I know all about my employees," he replied dryly. Emily stared at the envelope, then back up at John's sorrowful face. As the shock began to fade, she felt her body intense ever so slightly. She stepped back, gesturing for John to enter the apartment. He lingered in the doorway, unsure if he should accept the unspoken invitation. Silence hung heavy in the dim apartment. John looked at Emily with a profound new understanding and admiration. She was no fragile victim. She was a survivor, steadfastly resilient in the face of profound tragedy. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that hell, Emily," John said, his voice thick with emotion. "You've shown incredible strength, especially taking care of your mother after everything." Emily allowed herself the faintest sad smile. "She tried to stop him that night, you know. Fought to protect me. That's how she got hurt, too." John felt overwhelmed by guilt for accusing this brave woman of wrongdoing, for forcing her to relive her painful past. Here he had been tormented for over a decade by leaving a stranger for dead, while Emily had actively saved her own mother from the same fate, and still loved her unconditionally, despite the horrible aftermath. In that moment, John knew atonement could never be enough to make up for his decades of cowardice and self-loathing. He could only hope to learn from Emily's true demonstration of courage and selflessness. "Please, let me help you both for as long as you need," John said resolutely. "Whatever it costs to get your mom back on her feet, to get you both on a path to healing, it's the least I can do." Emily studied him carefully before giving him a slow nod of acceptance. Though there were still many hurdles ahead, tentative seeds of forgiveness had finally been planted between them. Over the next 6 months, true to his word, John spared no expense ensuring Emily and her mother received the very best medical care and therapy. He personally oversaw their treatments, driving them to appointments and sitting bedside with an attentive ear. Slowly but surely, Emily's mother regained her strength and began the long trek toward recovery, buoyed by her daughter's unwavering devotion and support. Though permanent scars would always remain, their hearts and souls experienced profound healing. As for John, he found a new perspective by witnessing the unbreakable mother-daughter bond. The shame and regret he once carried began to feel lighter, replaced with newfound purpose and hope for redemption. One warm spring evening, Emily and John strolled together through a park near the rehabilitation center. Her mother was making excellent progress and would soon be able to return home. "I can't thank you enough for everything, John," Emily said softly, breaking their comfortable silence. "I don't know how we would have made it through this without your help." John smiled warmly at her. "You've more than repaid me 1,000,000 times over, Emily. Getting to know the person you truly are, your compassion, your resilience, you've shown me how to be a better man." They lapsed into silence again, enjoying the budding scenery around them as the sun began to set. Finally, Emily stopped walking and turned to face John fully. "I need to get something off my chest, something I've known for a while." John regarded her curiously as she drew a deep, steadying breath. "I know you were the one who fled after causing that car accident all those years ago," Emily stated evenly. John felt like he had been punched in the gut, the air suddenly expelling from his lungs. Emily held up a hand, forestalling his abject apologies. "Please, let me finish," she said calmly. "For a long time I despised the thought of the coward who had left my mom and I for dead. I was so consumed by hatred." Her eyes turned glassy with unshed tears. "But after getting to know you these past months, I realized holding on to that anger was poisoning me. Continuing to play the victim would have prevented me from healing and moving forward." John stared at Emily, awed by her capacity for grace after all she had endured. Here he was, the catalyst of her nightmarish childhood, and she was unburdening him of his guilt. Emily stepped closer, placing a hand on John's arm. "I've forgiven you, John, completely and utterly. By helping us, you've righted the biggest wrong and shown you've become someone truly good." John felt tears streak his own cheeks as a weight he had carried for 15 years finally lifted from his shoulders. He pulled Emily into a fierce hug, pouring out a lifetime of remorse and gratitude. "Thank you. You've given me a second chance at life," he choked out, overwhelmed. The pair held their embrace for a long moment, acutely aware that their pasts had irrevocably reshaped their lives into an entwined, fateful bond. In that suspended pocket of time, the hurt and scars of the past finally began to heal. 1 year later, John stood anxiously at the altar, his heart thumping in his ears. He felt a calming hand on his shoulder and turned to see Emily's mother, Donna, smiling radiantly at him. "Taking quite a few deep breaths there, son," she teased lightly. Aside from a few faint scars peeking out from her dress, she looked like $1,000,000. Vivacious, healthy, and most importantly, happy. "I can't tell you how grateful I am for you, Donna," John replied, giving her hand an affectionate squeeze. "If you hadn't raised such an amazing woman, I'd have been lost forever." Donna's smile deepened as the first swells of the wedding march began to play. "Well, get ready to really start your new life together." And there she was, Emily, looking equally breathtaking and radiant in her elegant white gown. The terrible scars that had once marred her porcelain skin were still visible, but they seemed to glow along with her joyous smile. As Emily made her way down the aisle, John felt his throat constrict with overwhelming emotion. Just 3 years ago, he had been a miserable, self-loathing shell of a man, tormented by the demons of his reckless youth. But this remarkable woman, no, this incredible survivor, had pulled him from the brink into the warm light. By her example of unshakable courage, grace, and love, Emily had reshaped John into the man he never dreamed of becoming. As Emily reached the altar, their eyes met and all the words went unspoken. They had endured and transcended the worst of life's nightmares, irrevocably bound by their tragic histories. Yet in their spiritual rebirth on this joyous day, they vowed to leave those poisoned pasts behind forever. With their timeless union, a new chapter of peace, healing, and insurmountable devotion had begun. Side by side, the two beaming souls turned to face their officiator. No matter what challenges lay ahead, they would face them fearlessly, boldly embracing their hard-earned second chance at life together.